speaking of stock markets, let's take a look at what's been happening in regional markets. Joining me is Khaled Masri, Head of Brokerage at Regional Investment Bank, Rasmala. Thank you, Khaled, for coming on this show.
Pleasure, thank you.
So let's look back at the month of July. We didn't do too bad. We did see Saudi and Dubai end the months up 3%. What gave the markets that little boost?
Yeah, well, it was a fairly reasonable month, albeit on very low volumes. While we did end up a couple of percent across the region on average, some markets doing better than others. Importantly, the global scene was quite good actually in July, with sort of global markets on average ending up 8% as measured by the broad index. So we still lagged the rest of the world in July. It was an oil story in some countries. Oil was strong, so Saudi, Qatar certainly benefited from it. Egypt benefited from a relative improvement in global investor sentiment, Egypt being one of the more established and deep regional markets. So we saw some certainly signs of some more investor flows into there. Whereas some of the, let's say, structurally weaker markets, unfortunately, such as we have in the UAE, did sort of less good than others as well during the month. So overall, yes, a fairly good month, but early days yet to say that we're sort of on a more firm footing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Dubai, they've already shed 1.5% just this month for August so far. Year to date, the DFM is down about 17%. What will it take to turn things around? First, we thought it was, all eyes on Dubai World restructuring story. Then it was on Q2 earnings. It looks like it's going to take a lot more than that. Yeah, unfortunately, we would agree. And in all fairness and transparency, we thought that it was a Dubai World ongoing. I guess call it a saga now. It's been going on for almost close to a year now. So we thought, once and most of that is behind us. But still, as you say, sentiment is still poor, liquidity is still poor, investor participation, be it from the domestics or even the regionals or even the internationals, has been very poor. So that leads me to think that it does not look like there will be one, decisive catalyst. Yeah, exactly, decisive catalyst that will. They hopefully bring things back to at least some semblance of normality, because where we are today is not normal. The valuations are not normal, the trading volumes are not normal. Investors are just absent, for the last 3 months at least, totally absent from the market. So it's going to be, I think, a series of confidence building. So gradual.
It looks like it's going to be gradual. Where it's going to come from, there's a whole slew of issues. That it's going to come from further confirmation that the banking sector is, let's say, well capitalized. Yeah. That's certainly our view. The latest Rasmala research came out on the UAE banking sector. Certainly our view is that fears, I wouldn't say unfounded, they are founded. I mean, there are issues, but certainly overdone, we would say, and there's good value, even in the banks that have been the most affected by
so better positioned than we would have thought.
I would think so, yes, absolutely. So but sentiment is a tricky thing. Markets are fickle, investors are fickle, and I think once sentiment does turn, you will not be able to buy these stocks at these prices, which are, I think, abnormally low.
Very cheap right now.
Very cheap. But indeed, yes, it will not be one catalyst, is the case. Dubai World, earnings, etc. We've had a lot of things behind us. Earnings, for the most part, have been decent. And the poor earnings that came out from a couple of the banks have been well discounted by the market. Everyone knew that some of these banks or real estate companies had issues. So it wasn't a surprise that they came out with losses for the most part. So it looks like it'll take some time.
Speaking of surprises, one piece of news that surprised everyone here in the UAE was the recent news between the TRA, the Telecoms Regulatory Authority, and Research in Motion, the makers of BlackBerry, saying that they might be suspending BlackBerry services in the UAE come October of this month. Where are we on that? We did see the Research in Motion shares suffer when the news came out. They lost about 4%. Did the telco shares in the UAE suffer at all? We do have Etisalat in Abu Dhabi, and we have Du here in Dubai. Sure. Did they move?
No, the effect on the stock market or on these shares anyway has been very muted. The stock market took it in stride. Albeit the fact that certainly it is our view at Rasmala Research that mobile data, which are things like those smartphones, etc., are certainly the growth area for these companies. They're relatively high margin products that they can use to acquire further market share and whatnot. So it's not like investors don't think they're important, but I think the view is that if it is not BlackBerry, it's something else. There will be some other service that will come into the market and do it. Plus, I think in general in the UAE, the lack of investor participation, I don't think people are just not doing much. To be blunt, put it simply, people are just not doing much in the market these days. We saw in Saudi a bit more action around the BlackBerry story.
I think that's being resolved now, though.
Apparently, it's been resolved. So the sense is here in the UAE that it may be resolved. I don't know anything that's not in the public domain.
Yes.
So the idea is that there are some discussions going on. I don't have a view different than, I don't have a stronger view than anybody else or any privileged information on it. But certainly mobile data and smartphones and whatnot are part of that, are absolutely the growth area for these companies. And if it's not, BlackBerry, we think that these companies will find, I can't talk up one product versus another on the air, but certainly there will be a competing technology, let's say, that these companies will offer if they cannot offer this BlackBerry service. So it's been more buzz on media and chat rooms and blogs than it has had an effect on the stock market. Yeah.
Okay, let's zoom out of the UAE. If we look at the region as a whole, only 3 out of 11 markets in the region are up year to date, some between 2 and 4%. Now, these 3 markets are Saudi, Qatar, and Egypt. Could you take us through their individual scenarios and sort of maybe explain to us what has kept them afloat?
Yeah, sure. No, that's an accurate observation, and I think it's justified. Markets are not always logical, but I think this phenomenon, let's say, is logical. Saudi and Qatar have benefited, I think, primarily from a improved global sentiment, which has spilled over into stronger oil prices and stronger prices for petrochemicals, and certainly Saudi Arabia and Qatar are, notwithstanding SABIC, I think Q2 numbers were slightly below expectations, but notwithstanding that, it certainly is a more healthy environment for oil-driven companies and oil-driven economies, of Saudi, Qatar certainly being 2 of those. Yeah. Saudi's also benefited by being due to the fact that it is a let's say scarcity factor. It's still a market that foreign investors find it difficult to get into. So the ones that are able to enter through swaps and whatnot really are, continuing to try to enter. Yeah. Let's say so. There's not much selling pressure because there's nobody, not too many people in the market in the first place. Qatar is a less developed market than Saudi, than Egypt, than even the UAE. However, Qatar has benefited a lot from, first of all, firmer oil prices, petrochemical, and plus, very importantly, the macroeconomics. It's a high-growth economy. LNG is coming, further online, and what gas exports are, increasing phenomenally and whatnot. But also importantly, the banking system is rock solid. Whereas, for example, here in the UAE, a lot of the poor sentiment has come out of some, in our view, unjustified, but nevertheless, there are some questions on the whole system and the country. Whereas Qatar, basically, the central bank has drawn a line under the banks and just basically said, for all intents and purposes, the banks there are, in a sense, nationalized, in that the central bank has taken responsibility for the banks' balance sheets, has bought from them, any problematic real estate or stock market or investments and whatnot. So certainly, as investors look to get back into the markets, they seem more comforted by these 2 places.
Yeah, solid reassurance there.
Sure. Egypt is the other one that's up a couple of percent this year. And, Egypt, the market dynamics in Egypt, I would argue, probably are the healthiest, really, across the region. Liquidity, I should say, investor volumes, trading volumes, are similar to what they were last year, whereas across the GCC, they're a fraction of what they were last year. The retail, the domestic retail market in Egypt is fairly healthy in terms of, retail local investors participating, and there's signs of some international investors, coming back in as well to the market. So it's, the UAE is the cheapest, valuation-wise, is absolutely the most tempting market. However, at this still uncertain time that we're in, investors are not sort of seduced by this valuation. They would rather go to markets that they see are more, let's say, structurally solid, which we see certainly in Qatar, Saudi, I would say, and certainly Egypt as well.
We tend to track global markets. Where are we on the correlation story right now?
We seem to be, unfortunately, correlated on the way down. Okay. Unfortunately, when there's bad, and that's a sign of the investor, I would say, apathy or or poor sentiment.
Poor
absolutely. Sentiment. When there's bad news, globally, we got punished by the debt crisis in Europe, by Greece and Italy and whatnot, the issues, and yet on the way up, as I mentioned. I think July was a good month globally. The broad market, global market indices were up something like 8%. We were up just a couple of percent across the region. However, I'm quite sure that in this environment, if some bad news was to come out globally,
We would suffer.
we would suffer, yeah.
Thank you very much, Khaled. That was Khaled Masri, Head of Brokerage at Rasmala Investment Bank.